Hello, I'm Dr. Angie McCartney.
And I'm Ruth McCartney.
Welcome to T-Flicks,
where each episode's intimate conversation features a fascinating guest across the spectrum of Beatles world, pop culture, Grammy winners, the music industry, chefs, producers, music stars, actors, and more. So bottoms up and join us as they spill the tea on T-Flicks. We are live, so it says here.
Oh, jolly good. Some of us more live than others.
Well, my hair looks a bit dead, but anyway.
Oh, never mind. Yeah.
There we go. So checking with engineering and production upstairs. Can you refresh the Facebookie and make sure we have live and sound? And there we go. Well,
hello.
Welcome, folks. Welcome to T-Flicks Tuesday.
Yes. I would like to say, first of all, my earrings and my necklace. Lovely gift from Elizabeth. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. They're gorgeous.
Little crystal teapot.
Yeah,
so
crystal teapots, yes.
And I would like to say thank you to G. Tom Mack.
Yes.
To a.k.a. Gerard McMahon, a.k.a. Mr. Cry Little Sister, and for introducing us to these fantastic people that we're going to have today. So we have 3 guests, 2 male and 1 female. And so because it's a lady subject, yes. I'm going to start by introducing our lady guest first. Dominique Debreu has a background in business and fashion, but she's now moved her lifelong passion of cooking and providing her audience with nutritional food therapy. She's run U.S. divisions of international companies and produced many films, including one that showed at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival, plus the Wise Women film co-produced that we're going to talk about today. Her partner, Chris, who is the director, he's an award-winning director and has been in the film biz his whole life as a child actor, film editor, and director. Past works include the pregnancy documentary 40 Weeks and the environmental film Planet of the Humans, which was executive produced by none other than Michael Moore. And our third guest today is Jonathan Sanger. He's an acclaimed producer with a prolific career spanning over 40 years, which I can't believe when you look at him because he's only 36. He's worked in both film and theater. His work has garnered significant recognition, including 3 Academy Awards, 21 Academy Award nominations, a British Academy Film Award, and a French César. Notable films he's produced have included The Elephant Man, Francis, Without Limits, Vanilla Sky, and The Producers, the musical, near and dear to my heart, for sure. Yeah. Recently, he's produced Chapter and Verse and Marshall and is completing Cabrini. Sanger's directing credits include over 15 TV episodes and films, like Codename Emerald and Down Came a Blackbird. He holds a BA and Masters in Communications from the University of Pennsylvania, and he also served in the Peace Corps, where he became fluent in Spanish. So hola to all of our guests, and here they come now, all the way from the East Coast.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Folks. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
We are delighted that you had the time to join us, and thank you to G. Tom Mack for putting us all in touch.
Indeed. Yes. Thank you, Gerard.
Yeah,
absolutely. So yes, we've got some lovely comments coming in the spirit of celebrating women. Yeah. You two, we're at the top of Barbara's list, but I'm sure you 3 will be at the top of everyone's list by the end of the broadcast. So let's start at the end. How did you 3 meet?
Well, indirectly through Gerard, because there's another person, John Golden, that Gerard knows. He introduced us to Jonathan. And, once you meet Jonathan, you realize, and then you meet Carly, you realize that you'll know them forever. They're those kind of good people. So that's how we got together.
And we had Gerard over for a dinner. And that's my love language, is cooking for people. And since Carla, his wife, is also a wonderful cook, he really appreciated that. And we just became friends.
Yeah.
No, actually, yes, it was through Dominique and through her extraordinary cooking and just her knowledge of food in every aspect of it that got me interested. And of course, she introduced me to Chris. And when Chris told me he was a documentary filmmaker, we had a lot in common. So we had a lot to talk about. And he had told me about the movie he had done about pregnancy. But when he told me about the movie that he was interested in doing, which was the movie that we're talking about here, Wise Women, I was fascinated by it because I've always been surrounded by very strong, independent women. And in my life, from my mother to my wife to my sister, I have a very strong female contingent. And I always felt that women have never been given the due that they deserve in the world. I mean, yes, they have to some extent, but I think that the patriarchy has really kept them down. And I was very interested in being involved in a project that really exposed the facts of why women should be ruling the world. And
very timely.
I strongly believe that even more today than ever. So I'm just.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you think about the amount, just obviously politics is on our mind at the moment. And when you think about how many politicians and governments there have been in the history of the world, and you can really only name Indira Gandhi, Benazir Bhutto, Margaret Thatcher, Angela Merkel, you know, I mean, you don't even have to take your socks off to count the women right, who've been in positions of power around the world. It's kind of frightening, actually, because, you know, we have brains too, right?
Oh. Indeed. And one of the things to remember about the concept of history, or his story, is that history is considered when we started writing things down, which happened 10,000 years ago. So history is only 10,000 years old. Before history is her story. And that's what we discovered was her story when we investigated trying to help her through her perimenopause and menopause.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, this whole film started when I started, you know, my body started changing, my emotions started changing. And about 8 years ago is when the biggest symptoms and changes started. And he happened to be working on a project where he needed to interview OBGYNs who specialized in menopause. So I said to him, please ask them questions, because I was finding it very hard to find information, help, good therapies, and the kind of support that I needed. So he went off, but unfortunately, the answers he got, I don't know that they were any more helpful.
Well, one of the answers that sort of really set me off was I asked a male OBGYN, I said, why do you have to treat menopause? And he said, well, because we're fixing nature's mistake. Oh, yes.
That's what I did.
I'll tell you what, there's one doctor right there that's not getting anywhere near my hoo-hoo. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
So that just, it really just started this journey of saying, well, I don't think it's a mistake. What is it then? And
on the other end, is puberty a mistake?
Yeah, our pregnancy.
Exactly.
Oh, often, yes. Pregnancy.
Pregnancy could be a mistake, yes, but not puberty.
Interesting.
Pardon me.
He told you he was fixing nature's mistake, but so that means, you know, hormone replacement therapy and stuff like that, I assume he was talking about.
Yes. And what a lot of OBGYNs believe is that the average lifespan, it is around 50 traditionally over our recorded history. Yeah. And so therefore, most women aren't menopausal by the time they're 50. And so it's a modern phenomenon.
I was only 38, would you believe?
Wow.
Okay.
And I was in Liverpool in those days. I lived in England, and I was recommended to a New Zealander who was running a clinic in Liverpool, and he put me on HRT all those years ago, 1964.
No, I'm still battling with it. My thermostat broke about 12 years ago. And you know, it doesn't know whether to put the heat on or the air conditioning or whatever's going on. Yeah. And as I told you the other day on our tech test, one of our old comedian friends has a great line that's she says, "I'm dry in places I used to be wet in places I used to be dry. I can't find my goddamn car keys."
Yes.
So you know where did that whole notion of fixing mistakes come from? Do you think, Dominique? Do you think it's because women were just tired of, you know, the sleepless nights and the hot flashes, and we demanded a drug to fix us? Or do you think it was big pharma, mainly run by men, going, oh, we need our women to be vital and ample and virile, let's put them on drugs and fix them?
I think it's a couple of things. I think, first of all, medicine hasn't paid attention to women's health, except for the things that are important to them, which is childbirth. Right. Yeah. Because that's the reproduction. So let's pay attention to that so that fewer women die. Right. But other than that, we can see, and there's a lot of writing coming out about how women's medicine in general has not been paid attention to. Then there's this mistaken belief that the average lifespan meant that people did not live beyond it. But an average is an average. And the minute that Christopher spoke to an anthropologist who specializes in that, she said, it's a mistake. And this is why. And she showed right away that it's been ages that people have lived beyond 50. Yes. So we've actually, females of our species have gone into menopause a lot before. And so medicine has not paid attention to that.
Yeah.
And now, as they're paying attention, because thank God we're coming forward and going, pay attention.
Right.
But they still have a perspective on it that is not helping us. Their perspective is still that the fertility of a woman is the most important. And afterwards, we're are we useful? I don't know. Right. And that's what society and medicine tells us. Yeah. Whereas when Chris went down this rabbit hole, right, I was looking for help my hot flashes, help, but he actually found out something much deeper. And when he went through it, the perspective is actually that women are important in a lot of different facets. And the menopausal and postmenopausal years are the time where our wisdom and our leadership can shine forward, and we don't have the rocking waves of the hormones.
Yeah.
Right. Very interesting. Jonathan, in Hollywood, it's still, unfortunately, I think that use of, you're past your sell-by date. It's almost like an actress.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
And Hollywood is yogurt. Once she's 50, she's not interested until she's Jessica Tandy at 82 or Ange at 94, right? There's this gap in the middle where you're just not interesting.
It's true. And I think that I've always been bothered by it. And I think we are seeing some changes, but minor changes. It's funny. I just finished this movie, Cabrini, which is about a real woman in the 1890s who was remarkable. I mean, she did things that women weren't able to do. She was able to get past the patriarchy and get things done in a way that very few women were doing. And it was fascinating to me. And it was part of that journey on that movie that got me connected to Dominique and Chris. And when we talked about it, I showed them the movie too. And we realized that our ideas were aligned in terms of what we thought. And what I learned from Dominique really had a lot to do with the way we've evolved from the way we eat, and how food has had a great deal to do with home and hearth, and women being the center of that. Whereas men would have, I'm talking about in prehistory, really, where men would go out and hunt, but women would really be responsible for maintaining the home and the place.
The cave.
Now, what happened is, I think one of the things that we talk about in the film is the notion that, again, the patriarchy looked at that and said, well, yes, women are good beyond their fertility years. They're very good for taking care of, being babysitters. They can be
the grandchildren. Yeah,
and that was called the grandmother hypothesis, which is a generally accepted idea in male circles in medicine. But what we are proposing is something quite revolutionary in a sense, but even more real, and that is what we call the wise woman hypothesis, which is really what Dominique was talking about: the fact that post-fertility allows women to come into their strongest selves in many ways and be the people who can be major leaders. And men have always pushed that down and said, no, you be the, and Hollywood does it more than anybody too. I agree with you, because I think that the notion of constant, men can go on and be heroes into their 60s and 70s, but women have to have fillers, and they've got to have Botox, and they've got to have everything to make them attractive and look young enough, so that they attract men and are still useful. And that's an absurd notion.
I think also
one of your watchers, Diana, just said older women have worth.
Yep.
Yes. not only do older women have worth, but we have a specific kind of worth in society that is key and has been underused.
Yeah. And I think also it's just the whole food chain, especially we're talking back about Hollywood. It's like, you know, agents only are as good as their working actors 15%, right? Or 20%. So if you are in Hollywood, would you rather be Harrison Ford's agent or Sharon Stone's agent right now?
No.
Well, Harrison Ford is going to have a much easier time switching from one agency to another than Sharon, who is an absolutely brilliant actor of our time and a wonderful woman. I made a film with her in Nashville many moons ago, and she's a gorgeous soul. But because we have this, you're past your sell-by date until you're interesting again, and you can play on Golden Pond, or you can play the old lady, you know, the old crone, which will bring me to my next point. I love to see projects like Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, you know, and projects like, what was it you were watching the other day with Kathy Bates and a marijuana story on Netflix?
Yes.
These women have come up and learned their craft just as hard as the men. So I am always about championing. I'll watch something and give it 6 thumbs up on Netflix, even if I don't think it's particularly either well written or well shot or whatever. If it stars women between, you know, 50 and 100, I'm behind it, because we need to change that perception. And Hollywood has unfortunately played such a large part in everybody's, you know, psyche of, you're on this kind of elf on a shelf.
Well, if I can give like a thumbs up to Christopher of the kind of mind that he has. You know, I was looking for the little help, please help me find therapies. When he got that answer from the doctor, he can't stop until he finds justice. And so tell him what you found.
Well,
like,
basically,
what is the through line here?
It's what's so amazing. And we talk about the way women are treated today, right? This is a modern phenomenon. This is only 10,000 years old. What we were before was because of the social capabilities of women in general, and then the special social capabilities that old and more mature women have post-reproduction. Once we started harnessing fire and cooking and setting up camps, it caused us to stop and set up a camp that we had to manage this camp. And managing the camp, the groups that had post-reproductive females did better than the ones who didn't, because cooking also increases lifespans. So we went from what is known as Homo habilis about 2 million years ago to Homo erectus in about 200,000 years, due to us harnessing fire, changing our jaw structure, right? The movie covers all of these things. But it turns out that the presence of the post-reproductive women is most important. And we lived exalting that, because that's how we grew our brains, and that social capability was what we functioned with. That worked all the way until something known as reproductive consciousness. And the person who coined the name reproductive consciousness is in the film. Her name is Holly Dunsworth. And reproductive consciousness is when we started breeding animals and crops. And what happened when we were breeding things, because before then we didn't know that sex made babies, right? We're humans know that sex makes babies and that we're going to die. We have these 2 unique attributes in the whole biosphere, and that changes our behavior, right? And so once we had this idea of sort of manufacturing animals and breeding animals, the only obvious thing of sex is what the man produces. So what happened is that technology caused the rise of male domination instead of the female sort of way we were doing. And so where we are is because then you have this breeding, and the value is your ability to make a baby. And so fertility becomes the valuable commodity, again, only 10,000 years ago, also coincidentally when we start what we know as history, right? And so where we're at right now is the whole hope for this project for me originally was just to help her through it. But it turns out that somehow, in my awkward way, I stumbled on a story that could really help women to understand why they feel the way they do. Because I haven't talked to a woman yet who's been surprised by this findings.
No.
right? But they now are going to understand better why they feel this way. And then you guys can take this information and this knowledge and this understanding of your capability and help us to move forward, because we really need it. So that's the baseline of this.
That's why, I mean, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family in Liverpool and had, 300 plus cousins and second cousins by the time I was 14. And I was the youngest, so I got stuck with all the babysitting and the poop and all of that. So I decided by the time I was 12, I didn't want to have kids. I wasn't going to be cut out for it. I have no patience. And, I knew that. So honest to God, growing up, half of my family thought I was either a communist or a lesbian. There was something wrong with me because I just didn't want to have, neither of which is true. I'm, happily married, but I so admire women and men that want to be parents, that want to be mothers, that want to do that thing, which is why I'm kind of confounded with the whole IVF banning situation. If IVF makes more babies, I'm not going to get too political, but it's just, I'm scratching my head going, wait, doesn't IVF make babies? So why are we, okay, moving on.
Yeah.
It's just clearly, not aimed at me, but I agree. I think that, we've been told by the patriarchy so many years that you're useful when you're sexy, and then you're useful again when you can babysit the grandkids. The gap in the middle is like, what are you supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
But we were in Australia many moons ago with our old friend Rory Crawford, who's married a Japanese lady, Takako, and they have a son and a daughter. And we were all sitting around, and Takako wanted Amelia to go and help do dishes and help grandma downstairs next door to bed and this, that, and the other. And she spoke to her in Japanese. And I said to Rory, what did Takako just ask Amelia to do? He said, I have no idea. I said, but you speak perfect Japanese. He was a Qantas flight guy for 30 years, spoke perfect Japanese. He said, oh yeah, I speak male Japanese. There's a female Japanese language that is never taught to me.
Wow, I love that.
His wife and his daughter could sit at a kitchen table with him and have a conversation, even though he's Japanese. No,
couldn't understand it.
So that just fascinated me. That still to this day, in the modern era, there is some part of Japan that is still a matriarchal society when it comes to communication. Wild, huh?
Well, because we've had to hide so much of ourselves to keep it alive, right?
Yep.
Because along the way of the kind of gaslighting of how you're told you're only important for this, don't even try to go for that, etc. You kind of have to hold it precious inside. And I love how the Japanese women created an entire world for themselves that the men can't come in.
That's right. No, it's just, it's fascinating.
I know, it is fascinating.
Maybe that was Brendan from Ireland is talking about John and Yoko. And maybe that was part of John's fascination with Yoko in the beginning, because, that's just a whole nother foreign world to him. He grew up with a mother that he loved and lost, Auntie Mimi, that brought John Lennon up, was very, very strict. And, his sister Julia, half sister Julia, and he were split apart and brought up in different houses. So I think he was probably looking for the anchor of a strong woman. It sticks in my craw the amount of hate Yoko still gets. She didn't do anything but have a Beatle fall in love with her. It's crazy. It's absolutely
one of the questions.
Well, God forbid women are strong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the questions that Jonathan and I both get is about a man's participation in this project.
Right.
And I had worried initially about that, and Jonathan and I talked about it until we started showing it to people. And we had screenings with this, and the men in the screening said, we're so, like an 18-year-old man said, I'm so grateful that I saw this because now I can understand my mom and sisters better.
Yes.
And what they said is the bully patriarchy, you have a few that are really loud and dominate the space. And they also dominate our capability to communicate, and we're more quiet. And so a lot of them have said, which is warming me, that we're waiting to be heard. We're waiting to step up and help. And so for the men who are watching this, I think there's an opportunity to find a place that feels more natural as well, to be in service, as opposed to sort of trying to deal with things or conquer things. It's just, it's so bizarre to me. So that's also something that we found out by doing this.
That's great that young, especially young men, are resonating with it, because obviously, they are the future. They are our our leaders and our voters and all of those things. My husband shouldn't be, because he grew up in the 60s in Germany. He was forced to go in the German army and all of that stuff. But he's a musician and a producer and all of those things. So he's very artistic. But he's one of the biggest feminists I know. He'll stick up for, the woman's side of the story if it's right, not just because. But
it goes even simpler. One of the OBGYNs in the film, Carla Williams, as part of her interview, because it's in the movie, to describe what an actual cycle is. And so Carla is describing, and I'm with my friend Rob Muzak in this interview, and we finished, and at the end, her describing what one monthly cycle is for a woman, he says, Chris, I had no idea.
Yeah.
That intense. And you guys just have so much amazing grace about that. It's just so incredible. And
he said, I'm going to go home and be a lot nicer to my wife.
Good.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how it's all to do with the moon and the tides and where you are and where you're born and what you eat. And
exactly. And the thing is, yes. So a man directed this because it's this particular man who has a kind of mind that he just kind of pulls out and sees the bigger picture, right? And in that moment, it's really good that he looked at the bigger picture, because what ended up happening is at the end of this, knowing the wise woman hypothesis and knowing the importance of menopause, etc., actually became better medicine for me. Changing the perspective had me look at things in a way that I have found much more natural things that help me. And one of the very interesting things is hot flashes became my teacher. I started realizing that I would go into hot flashes when I was having an emotion that I was stifling or something that I wanted to say that I was stifling.
Interesting.
So when I started letting it go and letting the emotion be, the hot flashes went away a lot faster.
Wow.
So everything that it's like the gauntlet that you're put through in the menopausal symptoms teaches you stuff about being a better leader and about, not biting your tongue as much.
Wow.
Interesting. Well,
That's very interesting.
I will start keeping a little hot flash diary, because they happen to me all the time. And it's usually when I'm anticipating stress.
There you go.
I used to get migraines.
It's an emotion that you're stifling, right?
Right. I'm worried about something, or we're stuck in traffic. We're going to be late. All of a sudden, the thermostat breaks and the air falls flat, and the whole drill. I don't need to tell you about it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to start keeping a note of that and see if there's a correlation for me, like you have.
Yeah.
And it's it will be such a groundbreaking idea right now, as simple as it sounds, that if women look at a hot flash as a teacher, because right now it goes back to that doctor saying that you're being told it's a mistake,
right?
Yes. It wouldn't exist if it was a mistake. Nature wouldn't have it happen.
That's
so
true.
Once we start embracing that this is for a cause, and I noticed how when I did the movie about pregnancy, women go through horrific, from my perspective, stuff to make a baby.
Exactly why I didn't want to.
Right? Indeed. But yet they're so glad to go through it. When my daughter started her cycling, she was proud and she felt mature and she was good about it. But I noticed women going through this other
even though
phase,
she got migraines, awful symptoms.
And when I started looking at women going through this other change, there was so much trepidation, so much fear, so much just feeling bad. And I'm like,
I called it dread.
Yeah, nature wouldn't do that. There's got to be something about this thing. So that's another thing that inspired this whole project.
And we hope that this project also changes the perspective for medicine, because we still need medicine to research, be it Eastern medicine, Western medicine, all of medicine, because better therapies, yes, let's help us be the best of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
But if they are looking at it from a perspective of, oops, you've missed your fertility, then they're not going to find the right
balance
therapies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
If they're looking at us like an athlete going into their prime, then they're going to treat us like that.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, When you were growing up, they used to whisper the change.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I first started my period, I was in a cinema. And when I didn't know what had happened to me, I was only 11.
Oh, my.
At the end,
Yeah,
and as I was coming out of the cinema, one of the people that ran the place called me and said, come in the office. I'm going to get a message to your mother to come and get you. And I said, why? And she looked at the back of my dress and she could see the stain. And she said, don't tell anybody about it. And then it was born that, oh, no.
And then,
my
grandmother, her mother said, whenever this is going to happen,
just
most of your life, just hide it. Never
make sure your father or
your brother doesn't see it. Never let your husband see that it's.
So it was a shameful thing.
So sorry.
Yes.
That was 1940. So
yeah,
you know.
I was born in 1929. That's right. Yeah.
But it's unusual, but it was obviously what my grandmother grew up with. But she was feisty as all get out. I mean, when my granddad. One time he missed their wedding anniversary. She had booked a babysitter. They had said they were going to the Dog and Gun pub for a bite to eat and a drink. You know, you just didn't go to a restaurant in the 1920s, 1930s. And he'd been for a few pints with the boys, forgotten the date, come home, tried, the key in the lock 93 times, and fallen asleep in front of the fire, which she let go out with, didn't put a blanket on him or anything. And he was in World War I. He was a chemist, and he had this huge white waxed handlebar mustache. So my grandmother, her mum, went in the kitchen, got the shears, the meat shears, cut half of his mustache off, and
she went to bed. Yeah. And you know what? He never mentioned it till the day he died. The following morning, she said she wakened up, and there was Bob with a cup of tea. Good morning, darling.
And a white upper lip.
And he shaved the other half off, and it was white.
Never said a word.
And he never mentioned it until the day he died.
So she was as feisty as all get out. But,
however,
there was another lovely time where he came home, forgotten her birthday or something like that. And he said, oh, well, what's for tea, woman? I'm bloody freezing. I hope you got some nice hot pot or something. And he picks up the Liverpool Echo, shakes the newspaper. And she was just so mad at him. She set fire to the bottom of the newspaper and went out for a walk.
And
just watch yourself, Chris.
All of those capabilities are with you guys. So I'm going to be very best behavior.
Well, I tell you what, the word crone came up when we were researching you guys. Now, a crone to me means like a crusty old
hag.
Yeah.
Like a witch.
But that wasn't the original.
It wasn't.
No, and here's the point. You said a crusty old hag as well. Yeah. So the etymology of those two words, even though we think of a crone, a hag, there's an etymology of the word crone that is coming from the crown chakra, the wisdom part of yourself. And hag also has an etymology from hagis, which is the holy. Oh. So most of the words that have been turned into insults for us, so crone, hag, witch, bitch, used to have very strong, like a witch used to be the wise woman of the town, herbalist, the midwife, etc.
Yeah.
So we also, and there's a section in the movie where we have this phenomenal linguist going through.
Well, she's a language anthropologist.
Sorry, I shortened it wrongly. That really shows all of these great words and how we need to claim them back, because it's a way. That's one of the reality warps that is part of the gaslighting. Right. All these words that we feel inside are strong are being used against us. Well, phooey.
And the transition of these words, which were quite natural in the 1400s, 1500s, that was when you had the witch craze in early modern Europe. And then it was sort of a gynocide against women from church and state to suppress them and their power. And so that's when all these words turned more harsh. And so it's one of these things where, what do bullies do? Bullies take things that are empowering and they try to disempower them. And so language is one of the principal forms. And so that's why we put a whole section in the film that talks about language. And it's actually one of the most important pieces that we're summing up the idea with. So, and that's where we're like, oh, crone has, it has, it's pejorative in some cultures, but not in others. And so it's one of these potential words that we can empower and take back from the
bring back.
I was a pop singer 1,000 years ago in Russia, and I went to Moscow State University at night to just learn conversational Russian for TV shows and interviews and stuff. And the first thing that I learned in 1917, when Lenin took over and burned all the school books and reprinted everything, was that, the flag was red, the star on top of the Kremlin is red, whatever. They took the word krasnaya, which formerly only meant beautiful. They did away with ruzhia, which was red. That is no longer a Russian word. Krasnaya and red are the same word, and it means beautiful.
Wow.
They also took the verb to I am, je suis, ich bin. They took that out of the Russian language. So if you speak to a Russian and you say, what do you do for a living? They will say, I used to say, ya pivica, I singer. You are not anything. The state is everything, and you are your job.
So there's an incredibly pertinent example of how patriarchal systems and authoritarian government would be a very intense version of that, uses language against freedom.
Yeah.
So what chance do all the poor babushkas out in the collective farms in the back of the Siberian steppes have in those, even today? There are so many societies still where women are just not a thing.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I always used to joke, it's like if men were the ones who had to bear children and be pregnant, we'd be extinct by now.
Oh,
ow, that hurts. Ow, that hurts.
What he usually says is that if he had to go through one cycle, he would go straight to the hospital and said, take it all out.
Yeah,
when I heard what those cycles were, I'm like, there's no, thank you. We would be one generation of species. And what I do is when my daughter tells me that she's got a savage migraine and she's nauseous because she's coming onto her cycle, I thank her. And when I do that for all women, I thank you guys for being what you are so that we can have what it is. When women go through pregnancy, I thank them. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And now that you're going through the menopause and this change of life, thank you for going for that, to be able to have this level of wisdom so that we can be the best versions of ourselves. So thank you for all of that, because I know I'm not the one to carry that torch.
There's an interesting comment here from Barbara.
Yeah.
Jonathan, isn't that interesting? What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree with it. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the notion of treating each other with greater respect and empathy through understanding that we're human first, and that instead of making these distinctions that are always meant when they're made to diminish us in one way or another. It's like, the language we were just talking about, and there are many other words, a word, bitch, for example, which is a word that there's no reason for it to have a negative aspect to it. It doesn't come from that, but nevertheless, we have put a negative impression on the word. And, we need to understand where that comes from and who is making that happen. This is not something that is natural or normal. What's natural or normal is for us to treat each other as humans, not as other than, somebody different in every way,
I said to my husband yesterday, it was just a random comment. Just for me personally, not for a lot of people. And we certainly lost 15 friends through COVID, and it was an absolute just horrible phenomenon. But one thing, because I always try and look at the glass half full, one thing that it did do for me was it was a uniting force behind. It was humanity. We were all one globe and one species against that thing called the coronavirus. And now they've got drugs for it. It's gone away. COVID's no more than a cold, blah, 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 all of that pablum that we keep getting fed. And now we're back to, left and right, black and white, wrong and right, and all of those things. I think if anything good, apart from the horrendous, loss of life and sacrifices that our nursing staff had to make. But if you look back in the billion years of history, that little blip, and whenever there was a pandemic, I think it unites humanity. And what I love about what you guys are doing is you're just trying to unite the genders and show people that we're all humans. Males need females, females need males. I don't care if you're gay or straight or what you identify as. We all just need each other.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of sci-fi. And if you notice, in all of the top ones, there's always a ruling council that brings together males, females, different types of, from different planets, etc. It's a council that rules.
Yeah.
And, the fact that we have not yet realized that the voices of women are just as important. And our movie doesn't say now it should be a patriarchy, which means, there's only women leaders and things like that.
Matriarchy. No.
A matriarchy is more about bringing together the society and bringing the voices together and deciding together what is best for us.
No, it's interesting in my own career and in my own life, I keep thinking about it. I totally recognize what you're saying in the sense that we are, the equality of the sexes and of humanity. But what I'm trying to do in the art that I do is tip the balance back to where it ought to be. I'm not saying that men or women should be the rulers. That's not, that isn't the point. The point is there needs to be a much better balance. And I think the patriarchy obviously has in a ruling sense has kind of pushed women down. And I think that needs to be adjusted. It has to be fixed. And I'm all for stories about those kinds of people who have made that attempt to do it. The heroines and heroes of my stories tend to be, and it isn't intentional. It's just, these are the things that move me. I made Frances, which was about a woman. I made Cabrini. I've made a number of movies that are hoping to rectify a balance that isn't there.
Yeah.
Right. How did you come by the Cabrini project?
Well, the Cabrini project was an interesting story because I had known very little about her, but I'm from New York. I did know her name. I knew when I found out that every street, there's a Cabrini Boulevard in the Bronx, there's a Cabrini Green in Chicago. Every place that is named Cabrini was named after this one woman. And in doing a little research, I found out that she was the first American saint. She was an Italian woman who believed in doing things in the U.S. I mean, not just in the U.S. She wanted to go around the world. She had a great idea, and she had to fight the church. She had to fight the city. Sure. She had to fight the archdiocese. She had to fight everybody. And she was a small, attractive woman who was, everyone underestimated her and she always understood that the power structure, you had to get to the top level in order to make things happen. And she was always able to do that. And this was an extraordinary woman. And I was fascinated by her and fascinated by her story. And I realized also that her story was much greater than one movie. It would be we could do a multi-part miniseries because she did so many things. Wow. But we could tell an origin story about a woman who did the unexpected every day of her life, always the unexpected.
That reminds me of a long gone friend of ours now, Evan Frances Agnew. She lived to be in her late 90s.
Wasn't she? Yeah.
And she was living in Illinois in the 40s probably, and was divorced and wanted to buy a house. And the bank said, well, you're a woman, you can't get a mortgage. Right. So she was the first woman in the state of Illinois to get a mortgage. And it took her about 2 years. Mm-hmm. She had the money. She had the job. She had, she had good background. She had great education. She went to Northwestern. And I sat literally here. She was probably in her 90s one day. We were sitting here having Mrs. McCartney's afternoon tea. And she told me this story. And I said, you're kidding me. In my lifetime, you were denied a mortgage because of your plumbing? Jesus Christ.
But think about it. I mean, in my own lifetime with my wife, I mean, she couldn't have gotten credit without my name on a, and she had a job. She worked more than I did. I couldn't. I mean, that now, of course, it has changed, but we're talking about only within the last 40 years. I mean, it hasn't been that long that it's changed.
Yeah.
Well, and that's another reason why, we had the suffragette movement in England, Emmeline Pankhurst, and these people, tied themselves to railings and threw themselves in front of the King's horse at the Grand National and literally died for women to get the vote. And now I say to people, I don't talk politics. I don't tell anybody what to do. I'm like, hey, November 5th, it's a Tuesday, plan a pizza, get the morning out, get out and vote. And they're like, my vote doesn't count. I can't be asked. I can't be bothered. I just sort of smack them straight in the teeth. I'm like, women died to get women to vote. What are you doing? It's just crazy. My friend Gail McGregor, who's an incredible jazz singer and composer, she's saying, if you guys want to get truly technical, since all humans start out as female, all men are therefore trans. Wrap your head around that bit of biology.
Well, we interestingly cover the difference in our DNA between male and female. So because women have there's 23 chromosomes, and women have all 23 are full X chromosomes. Mm-hmm. And men, the 23rd chromosome is different. We have what is known as an X and a Y. Right. Now, the X chromosome has thousands of pairs in it. Like 3,000, I think the number is. The Y chromosome for the male has 70.
And it's getting smaller, actually.
And it's disappearing, right?
It's disappearing,
That explains a lot.
Right?
I know it's one of the things when you're a documentarian, you have an idea and you start exploring the world. Yes. And you're sort of there's one of two things that are going to happen when you do that. One is the first person you talk to says, "Oh no, we all looked at this and it's been solved many years ago." Mm-hmm. And the other more wonderful thing is somebody says something to you that you had no idea, and you're like, "Oh my God, that's not only is that an amazing thing, but that's a great story." So that unfolded so many times in our process of making this film. I'm grateful for that. And this is one of those things that's like, oh, okay, our DNA is really different.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Chris in the movie basically says, wow, we're really simple. And that can be, you can turn that into something against men, but there's a beauty in that simplicity, and you describe it best with the colors.
Well, okay, the simple explanation, and thank you for indulging me in that. Yes. Computers, when they had first come out, they had like 16 colors, and they would try to make art with these 16 colors, right? Yes. And then they got better, and they wound up now there's billions or whatever, infinite amount of colors. So I look at male and female that way, that the women's mind is, you guys see billions or an infinite amount of colors. So, and the male mind, we see 16. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't do good things with that 16. And the real advantage is like, let's take the color green. Now, I'm talking to 3 women in this thing, and I say, imagine the color green. You now have an infinite variety of what you're imagining. And it could be quite distressful to know which green we're talking about.
Wow.
Right? Where I can see 2. And sometimes when we're talking and she'll represent a problem to me, I'll come back to her with a male sort of very
kind of focused. Well, how about this green? Yeah. Which totally helps me. Right. However, if I give him like a major family gathering to organize, and you have to keep in your mind a gazillion tones of green, the top of his head blows off.
Oh yeah.
So that shows how both of us need to be here. And that's the challenge with patriarchy, where it's simplified everything. The whole thing of, well, God, sex or gender, that's confusing enough. Let's just pick 2. There's only 2, right? No, there's more. And so that's why you have to have the minds that see many colors and the minds that see fewer colors work together to solve things.
There's a lovely meme that was going around a few years ago. It's 2 TV remotes, male and female. And the male one is about, regular size, like a little Roku remote. And it says on, off, sports, news, beer, nachos. And the female remote, you have to scroll down to see it all. Yes. And it's like there's 5,000 buttons. There's like Travel Channel, Food Network, Cooking Channel, BBC, Overseas Learning, Spanish, interior design, on, off, check on husband, and does my ass look big in these pants?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Jonathan, we have to find that, and we have to figure out how to add that to the movie, because we're finishing the movie right now. So so you're going to influence the movie, and I love that.
That's awesome.
We got to put that in.
I
there.
I definitely have to find that.
Well, you find it, or you just make it in Photoshop. I mean, somebody can AI that up in about 5 minutes, but it's so funny. And it's sort of on some brown Naugahyde couch. They're side by each, and the woman's remote is about 2 feet long, and the man is on off sports news, beer, nachos.
Oh yeah.
No sex?
Oh well, maybe, but I don't know.
Well, that's if all the other are fulfilled. Then especially
even the mind thoughts.
Yeah. When we're 15, no, there's only one button. But
oh no, absolutely. Gosh almighty. So how can people get involved, and are you still doing your completion funds and all of that stuff? What's how can our viewers, because this will go on YouTube, how can they interact with you?
So if you go to wisewomanmovie.com, that website today is not live, but it will be tomorrow. You can apply to actually test screen the movie and give us your feedback on it. And so we sort of we really believe one of the first important things about all of the information that we uncover for this film is the information needs to go out first. Yeah. And then, everything will build from there. Yeah. And so that's wisewomen.com. I'm sorry, wisewomenmovie.com. I should get that right.
Yes. Right? Wisewomenmovie.com. And there you also have the choice to go to our GoFundMe page and help in our completion of the film. And yes, we want feedback. The more feedback we get, the better.
So it's like that old shampoo commercial. They told 2 friends and they told 2 friends. And so do watch parties, invite people, spread the word about this idea. It's time. Yeah. And you're talking about brain sex?
Yes, exactly. Your commenter, Gail, talked about the movie Brain Sex.
No, it's a book, Brain Sex.
I'm sorry. The book Brain Sex, which we read 20 years ago now. Yeah. It transformed our relationship because it had us realize that our brains are so different. Yeah. And so even just to the point that, I would ask him a question and there would be blank for a little bit. It's because it took longer to get from, the thinking part to the communication part. And so, yes, that's the point. We have different brains and we have a lot of things that we need to solve in the world now. Let's get the different brains together instead of holding a whole set of brains and multiple sets of brains, to the side. Absolutely.
Well, a lot of our regular guests will know that we always honor our viewers, our guests, with a limerick. Madam's got a limerick book out, Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus. So I know. And so Paul Moody will be going, yay, limerick time. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we'd like to sing you out or talk you out with a little limerick. Fair warning, she's 1 Chardonnay in.
I'm not yet.
And I've had a little Aperol to match my so we generally get it wrong on the first go, but here we are anyway. With a 1, 2, 3. Our genius guests from today had plenty of great stuff to say. Their fountain of skills, defying all wills. We thank them for leading the way.
Ta-da!
There you go.
Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Well, don't forget to tip your waiters.
Yeah.
Great pleasure.
Absolutely.
Great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, and an honor to see you again. And please do give our love to your wonderful wife, Carla. A long time no see.
Yes.
And,
yes, absolutely.
This will be up on the T-Flix YouTube channel sometime today, and we will see you guys all of a sudden.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
for watching.
See you again soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to T-Flix, and check out Dr. Angie's books, Organic Teas and CBD at mrsmccartneysteas.com. Toodle pip.